On October 9th, two leaders of the Honduran indigenous group COPIN survived assassination attempts, just months after the founder of the activist group, Berta Cáceres, was herself assassinated. The violence comes 1 month after Honduras celebrated 195 years of independence from its old colonial overseer, Spain, and a few days after it also celebrated the Central American revolutionary who led that fight for independence. But Sunday's attack was a reminder that the country still faces the sort of plutocracy it tried 2 centuries ago to rid itself of, one that's composed not of a king and his royal emissaries, but of wealthy landowners, multinational corporations, and the sweeping influence of American imperialism on the continent.
September 15th marks 195 years since the Declaration of Independence of the Republic of Central America, before it split up into the 5 different countries that there are today, one of which being Honduras.
Canadian filmmaker Jesse Freeston released a documentary in 2014 called Resistencia, the Fight for the Aguan Valley, about the struggle in Honduras for democracy, centering around the 2009 military coup that plunged the already impoverished country into a state of persistent violence and militarization.
Entrando a la tierra, tocándole los intereses económicos a estos grandes terratenientes, es de la única forma que nos han escuchado.
Freeston says that despite being 200 years apart, the revolution of 1821 echoes many of the problems Honduras still faces.
And the person who led that revolt is actually from the area that is today Honduras, a man named Francisco Morazan. And he saw the republic as being not just for its own sake, just an independent thing, and that being the importance of it. The importance of the republic was that it was going to guarantee a better life for people in the country. And so one of the ideas that was basic to his revolution was that there would be quality, public, secular education for everybody. And this is one of the many dreams of Morazan that still hasn't been achieved in Honduras or in most of the countries of Central America. And this is one of the things that is behind the movement to refound Honduras through a new constitution, which led to the 2009 coup, which took place on the day that there was supposed to be that referendum on whether or not to rewrite the Constitution. And today, on September 15th, and for the last 7 years since the coup, we've seen these 2 different Hondurases in the streets. So one official march with military in the front, with police in the front, all about order and celebrating the symbols of that revolution 195 years ago, celebrating the face of Morazan. And the other march is one for the Honduras that is still to be, the Honduras of the Morazan envisioned, that still hasn't been born yet, and that is the vision of refounding Honduras with a new constitution with participation from all the sectors of the country.
According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Honduras is the most homicidal country in the world, and the state plays an important role in fomenting that violence. In a report that came out last month in September, Amnesty International found that Honduras was one of the most dangerous places to be an activist. An astounding 65%, that's 122 out of 185, of the murders of human rights defenders working on issues related to land, territory, or the environment registered across the world in 2015 were from Latin America, the report reads. 8 took place in Honduras, and 10 in Guatemala alone, making them the highest rate per capita in the region. But again, the risks of being an activist today only reflect what's always been true for Hondurans.
The 2 kind of founders of the Honduran state or whatever that are mentioned by the leaders of Honduras when they talk on September 15th and were mentioned by Juan Orlando Hernandez, the president, on September 15th this year, are Lempira and Morazan. Lempira was a Lenca leader, indigenous Lenca leader, who led a revolt against the Spanish and was killed by the Spanish. Morazan was killed after, years after the revolution because he wouldn't stop fighting for this more egalitarian republic that he saw. And he was killed by the local oligarchs, the oligarchs that were born in Central America. So now, 2 centuries later, we have a woman like Berta Cáceres, who, like Lempira, is from the indigenous Lenca group in Western Honduras. And like Morazan, was fighting for a national dream of refounding the country with a new constitution, a new republic that would actually guarantee the equal participation of everybody in the country and certain basic rights like the right to a decent, dignified education. And so just like Lempira and just like Morazan, we see her assassinated. And like those 2 men, it's very likely that it was a plot. We don't know the details because we still haven't had the independent international investigation that the family's been calling for the last 6 months, but along with many others. But it's probably likely that the people that made the decision to kill Berta Cáceres was some sort of collaboration between local oligarchs born in Honduras and people with interests from outside Honduras. And so, Berta, not many people are aware of this, but Berta was one of the first people to suggest rewriting the Constitution back when the Honduras signed the Central American Free Trade Agreement. She said, listen, the people in charge of this country are handing over this country to foreign investors. We need to refound this country and reestablish this republic on new terms. And now, 195 years later, after Morazan, Berta is no longer with us.
At last month's World Social Forum in Montreal, Canada, The Real News spoke to a survivor of Honduras' war on journalists. Felix Molina survived 2 assassination attempts in the span of 1 day earlier this year in May.
Nunca había sufrido un ataque con arma de fuego hasta hace muy recientemente, el 2 de mayo pasado. Tengo 4 heridas ahora en mi cuerpo. No puedo decir que es la policía, el ejército, pero sí le pregunto a la policía y al ejército que me diga quiénes me dispararon, y van más de 2 meses y el Estado no me dice quién me disparó. Entonces, y esa es la constante en la mayoría de los crímenes en Honduras. El 95% de los casos no es explicado por el Estado. Han asesinado a más de 40 periodistas.
The Real News caught up with Molina at the unveiling of a mural in downtown Montreal honoring Berta Cáceres for her activism, especially her efforts to prevent the world's largest dam construction company from building on the Rio Gualcarque in the western part of the country. But at last month's event in Montreal, 5 months after the assassination of one of the most celebrated activists in the world, the mood was a mix of hopeful and despondent. Hopeful that the Cáceres legacy would live on, and despondent after seeing how brazen the power elite in Honduras could really be when it came to silencing dissent.
Mi mami, junto con su organización, se enfrentó a los grandes poderes económicos, al Estado hondureño, a la militarización y a todas las empresas y gobiernos que promueven el extractivismo en Honduras y en América Latina.
Pero ahora, viendo la situación del país, tengo miedo, como la mayoría del pueblo de Honduras, del autoritarismo, del narcotráfico, de la colusión entre la política y el crimen organizado.
The military coup of 2009 not only toppled the democratically elected government of Manuel Zelaya, but annulled any real reform of the country's constitution, which many had hoped might help turn the country around. The coup was denounced universally by the international community, including the United States, but it was later discovered from Hillary Clinton's emails that unofficially the U.S. had taken actions to solidify Zelaya's overthrow in favor of those who carried out the coup.
Es evidente que la señora Clinton incrementará la cooperación militar a las fuerzas policiales y del ejército en Honduras. Y eso hay que decirlo francamente. Eso lo consideramos una conducta lamentable.
What Freeston and Molina see in a Clinton presidency is more of the same deceitfulness, mainly the use of progressive language with regards to Latin America while supporting controversial measures like what's known as the Plan for Prosperity.
Y no me cabe duda que ese discurso ahora pro-hispano, pro-comunidad latinoamericana va a ser detenida con fuerzas militares en México, en Guatemala, y que la Alianza para la Prosperidad o el Plan Biden es realmente un plan para detener militarmente la migración de Guatemala, El Salvador y Honduras, principalmente al territorio estadounidense.
We saw on September 15th, the day of supposed independence of Central America, we saw the big offer, the big thing that the president of Honduras was offering for his people was this plan for prosperity, which was written by, first proposed by Joe Biden in an op-ed in the New York Times, and then is an official plan that comes out of the U.S. Embassy and financed by the U.S. So this is what's on offer on the day of independence, is a plan written and developed by the U.S. government. And that plan is not really about prosperity. There's nothing new in this plan that would provide that any reasonable person that's seen what's happened in Central America in recent history would think is going to provide prosperity for Central American people. What it's more about is strengthening police and military and trying to lessen the flow of Central Americans fleeing their economic realities and the violent realities of Central America towards their northern neighbors towards the United States and Canada.
A Clinton presidency wouldn't be anything new for Honduras, says Freeston. The truth, he says, is that Hondurans are still a shackled people, free from outdated colonial rule, but today subjected to something else, albeit just as odious.
We wouldn't be talking about monarchy necessarily as being the institution that needs to be fought against in a country like Honduras, or that Hondurans are fighting against. Today it's sometimes a little more nebulous, but no less powerful in terms of maintaining a certain low standard of living for Honduras, keeping their wages down, keeping their life expectations down, their access to healthcare, their access to education. So I think for people on the ground in Honduras, they've seen, for example, in the last 30 plus years of electoral democracy, they've seen their lives not get any better in terms of their access to any of these things. And actually life has gotten a lot more violent and a lot more difficult for many people in Honduras.
Tengo miedo que las instituciones democráticas las perdimos. No hay justicia posible casi para nadie en el país. La impunidad es la característica de la nación. Y los militares y los policías parecen ser la única respuesta que el gobierno quiere dar a lo que está pasando a la gente. Diría que ese es como el entorno que está alrededor mío ahora.